السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. اللهم اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. بسم الله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. يا أيها النبي إنا أرسلناك شاهدا ومبشرا ونذيرا وداعيا إلى الله بإذنه وسراجا منيرا. I'd like to speak today about certain ayat from Surah Yasin. A lot of times in the Quran, Allah will speak about a certain topic, and it would seem that He would suddenly switch to a different topic, and it goes right over our head that these two are actually connected. And this is, why we're encouraged to do tadabbur in the Quran. We don't just recite it just for its beautiful sounds, or we don't just recite it just because it makes us feel good. We recite it because we're also supposed to think deeply about what we're reading and make connections between these things. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in Surah Yasin, He begins and He describes a unique situation among messengers in the Quran. Generally, people are sent one messenger, sometimes two. In this surah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, إِذْ أَرْسَلْنَا إِلَيْهِمُ اثْنَيْنِ فَكَذَّبُوهُمَا فَعَزَّزْنَا بِثَالِثٍ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we sent them two messengers and they rejected them, they denied them, so we sent them a third. And this is very rare in the Quran that Allah says He sent three messengers to a nation. Musa alayhi salam, he had his brother Harun. وَاجْعَلْ لِي وَزِيرًا مِنْ أَهْلِي هَارُونَ أَخِي أُشْدُدْ بِهِ أَزْرِي وَأَشْرِكْهُ فِي أَمْرِي. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, make me an assistant from my own family, when Musa called out to Allah. Harun, my brother, reinforce my back with him and make him partner in my mission. But what's interesting is, Harun came with Moses when he came to confront Pharaoh, the most powerful tyrant of his time. And Musa alayhi salam had asked for him as support. But if you read the story of him in the Quran, Harun actually didn't end up saying a word. It was mostly, psychological for Musa alayhi salam that he needed support. But Musa ended up saying every single word to Pharaoh himself. So now these three messengers come to these people and all of them are rejected. And in fact, they tell them, إِنَّا تَطَيَّرْنَا بِكُمْ. We think you are a curse upon our nation. And if you don't stop, they tell them, لَنَرْجُمَنَّكُمْ. We will stone you to death. Or we may give you another severe form of punishment. So then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us about another man. وَجَاءَ مِنْ أَقْصَى الْمَدِينَةِ رَجُلٌ يَسْعَى قَالَ يَا قَوْمِ اتَّبِعُوا الْمُرْسَلِينَ. Allah says that there came a man rushing from the farthest reaches of the city. مِنْ أَقْصَى الْمَدِينَةِ, in other words, from the outskirts of the city. Like, if you want to give an example here, if some guy comes from the Everglades, he's just living in the Everglades and he comes here. Nobody's ever seen him or heard of him. And he tells people to follow these messengers. What is incredible to me is that three messengers are sent to this nation, and Allah, when He talks about these three messengers, they only say a couple of words in the Quran. Well, they said a lot of words, but Allah saw it fit that He only recorded a couple of words of theirs in the Quran. This man, who is nameless and is not a messenger, his speech is actually over 3 times longer than all of the three messengers' speech combined. Allah saw it fit that these words were so important by a believer, by a man who was simply a believer, not a messenger, that his speech was that much longer than the messengers themselves. And in fact, not only his speech in this dunya, Allah continued to record his speech even in the akhirah. Some of his speech is actually after he has died and was resurrected, when he sees heaven, when he sees Jannah, and he describes, I wish my people would see this. They would have all believed. He records his speech in this dunya and in the afterlife. Imagine. Allah, after this, switches, and He seems to be talking about a topic that is completely unrelated if you don't do deep thinking about what Allah is really talking about here. Right after He describes this story of these messengers and this man, Allah switches and He begins to talk about the sun and the moon. Now what you have to remember before I describe these ayat to you is the sun is actually something that Allah compared with the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. يا أيها النبي إنا أرسلناك شاهدا ومبشرا ونذيرا وداعيا إلى الله بإذنه وسراجا منيرا. O Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, we have sent you as a witness and a bearer of good news and a warner, as the one who calls towards Allah with His permission, and as a siraj and munira. Siraj is a lamp, a luminous lamp, so it's basically something that lights up what is around it. And what we have to remember as well is this word is in the Quran is used to describe the sun as well. Allah says, وَجَعَلْنَا سِرَاجًا وَهَاجًا. He describes the sun as a siraj as well. So the Prophet here is described and is compared with the sun. The way he lights up those around him is described the same way that the sun lights up everything that the light touches. Because at the time, when the Prophet was here, it was impossible that you are around the Prophet ﷺ and you are not exposed to his light. He walked the Quran, he spoke perfectly, he did everything that Allah commanded him to do. You would notice him no matter if you were a mile away or if you were right next to him. This was a man that was different than everyone else. And he illuminated all of those that were around him. So Allah continues after describing the story of the three prophets and the man who came from the farthest reaches of the city, and he tells us, وَآيَةٌ لَهُمُ اللَّيْلُ نَسْلَخُ مِنْهُ النَّهَارَ فَإِذَا هُمْ مُظْلِمُونَ. And a sign for them is the night. We strip the day from it and they are suddenly in darkness. And darkness in the Quran, the night and darkness is often associated with ignorance, with people who disbelieve and they don't see the truth of this dunya. وَالشَّمْسُ تَجْرِي لِمُسْتَقَرٍ لَهَا ذَلِكَ تَقْدِيرُ الْعَزِيزِ الْعَلِيمِ. And the sun is quickly proceeding towards its destination. That is the design of the Almighty, the All-Knowing. وَالْقَمَرُ قَدَّرْنَاهُ مَنَازِلَ حَتَّى عَادَ كَالْعُرْجُونِ الْقَدِيمِ. And the moon, we make it go through phases until it turned like an old branch of date palm. Meaning when the moon is like a crescent where you can barely see it, described as an old branch of date palm because it has the same shape. لا الشمس ينبغي لها أن تدرك القمر ولا الليل سابق النهار. And it is not appropriate for the sun to get ahead of the moon, nor can the night come before the day. وَكُلٌّ فِي فَلَكٍ يَسْبَحُونَ. Each one of them is floating in an orbit. So when you read this right after Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is describing the story of messengers and describes to us the speech of a believer who was longer than the speech of the messengers, how are we to connect these two? One thing we have to remember now is Allah described that each one of these planets, or this star and this planet, each one of them has their own roles. It tells you that the moon has its own path that it follows, the sun has its own path that it follows, one cannot pass the other, each one of them has their own roles. The same way that when he was talking about messengers who came and were denied, and the believer, the same way that they had their role, this believer had his role to spread the message the same way that they were spreading the message. And in fact, he thought it fit Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that the way he spread the message was so inspirational for us that it was recorded for us and emphasized for us more than the Prophet's speech. Now, if the Prophet ﷺ is described as a siraj in the Quran, and if he's compared with the sun in the Quran, what does that mean for us? The comparison made, my brothers, here is the Prophet's light that is reflected upon the believers. We are compared to the moon, the same way that this believer was compared to the moon. The moon does not have its own light. The moon does not have its own light. The light that the moon emits is the reflected light of the sun, and is described as the thing that follows the sun. We know that scientifically now because the moon is within the gravitational force field of what? Of the sun. So we as believers, if we are described as the moon, and we are the reflected light of the Prophet ﷺ, that means our actions, our words, our everything that we utter and we decide to do should be a reflection of the Prophet ﷺ and his actions and his words. Interestingly, the sun does not go through phases, and this was highlighted in this ayah. The moon was highlighted to have phases. The full moon is not like the crescent moon. And the Prophet ﷺ also described us as having phases. Describing the iman of the believer, the Prophet ﷺ said it changes, it fluctuates. Sa'atun fasa'a. Describing that even within the hour it can change your iman. That's as the nature of human beings, that's how we are. But the Prophet ﷺ, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said that when He sent the Quran, لِنُثَبِّتْ بِهِ فُؤَادَكَ, that we made your heart firm. We made it constant. The Prophet's iman does not fluctuate. He is what we can hold on to, knowing that his iman does not fluctuate. His actions will not differ. The way he speaks will not change regardless of whether he is speaking to somebody cursing at him or somebody giving him salam. His speech will remain the same. Whereas us, it fluctuates. The same way as the moon does. Now, even when the moon is at its very, when the Quran says, حَتَّى عَادَ كَالْعُرْجُونِ الْقَدِيمِ, when the moon is going through its crescent phase, there's barely any light being emitted by the moon. Barely any at all. And the same for us. Sometimes we have times in our lives where we feel we are at an all-time low, as far as our iman is concerned. But you always have the hope that the same way that the moon eventually goes through its crescent phase and goes back to being a full moon, you always have the hope as well for you that your iman will also rise back again. The reason I wanted to highlight these ayat, my brothers, is because there is one term that I've heard said to me personally so many times, it makes my blood boil. That when we describe something from the Quran, or when somebody wants to know something about the Quran or the Sunnah, and you describe it to them, there's a common phrase that a lot of Muslims respond with. And that is, well, those are prophets. Where are they? Where are we? A lot of people are willing to throw away the Sunnah of Rasulullah ﷺ and the way he lived his life with the excuse that, well, he's a prophet and I'm just a nobody. Who am I? Giving themselves justification for why they don't follow His commandments, Allah's commandments. If that's the case, then why did He even bring us this message, my brothers? If the case is for us to say that we don't have any capability to follow the Prophet, why in the world would He have given us His Sunnah and over 1,400 years ago it is still going strong? You are, each one of us sitting here, we are the reflected light. The same way the sun's light is reflected off the moon. Each one of us should be reflecting the light of the Prophet ﷺ. There's an old Arabic saying that says, أَغْنَى الصَّبَاحُ عَلَى الْمِصْبَاحِ, that once the morning comes, there is no need for the lamp anymore. And a lot of us feel this way, that the prophets have come and they have and they have given the message and ensured that they have given it in a way that it lasts for the end of time. The Prophet ﷺ's message will last till the end of times. So we think that we can sit back now. And we have no responsibility to it. But make no mistake that each one of you sitting here, if you say La ilaha illallah Muhammadan Rasulullah, I don't care if the only action of worship you do is sitting here every Jum'ah. If you say La ilaha illallah Muhammadan Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, then you have the responsibility to carry on this faith. You have the responsibility to spread this faith. And especially, and most of all, to our children. If we are to ensure that here in the West there will be any Islam, our responsibility is to our children. The unfortunate thing is now, is when our children have taken false prophets. I grew up in this country hearing kids say, I want to be like Mike.
idolizing a man whose only accomplishment in life is that he perfected the act of throwing a rubber ball through a hoop. And these same children will memorize entire albums of rap artists. I don't think I should even call them artists. These rappers, they would memorize entire albums word for word, but they don't understand a word of the Quran, and they don't have a word of the Quran memorized. I've seen this growing up with my own eyes. So why in the world are we allowing our children to reflect that filth rather than reflect the Prophet's light, sallallahu alaihi wasallam? Make no mistake, my brothers, if you are a parent and if you are not making the effort to understand these ayat of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Quran, your children have no hope of learning them. You are their inspiration. You are the one they look to. So sit with your children and make sure that this light is reflected through them. Explain to them that when they see these things, when they see the sun and the moon, as a Muslim, you see them as signs. Allah says they are ayat. They are signs for you, reminders for you. We don't see the same way disbelievers see. When you see a bird in the sky, you don't just see a bird in the sky. You're supposed to remember in the Quran when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, أَوَلَمْ يَرَوْا إِلَى الطَّيْرِ فَوْقَهُمْ صَافَّاتٍ وَيَقْبِضْنَ. Do they not see when the birds spread their wings and close them back up? مَا يُمْسِكُهُنَّ إِلَّا الرَّحْمَنِ. Nothing is holding them up except for Ar-Rahman, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Those are the type of things that when a Muslim sees them, he is constantly reminded. Every time he looks at anything, he is reminded of the Prophet ﷺ, of Allah's words in the Quran. And if your children have absolutely no connection to these things they see in this life as signs, you're doing something wrong. You're doing them a disservice. You're not explaining to them that these things are signs. You're not describing what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said in the Quran, how we're supposed to look at these things. Don't let them fall into this delusion. This life is a delusion. We are supposed to see past it. We're supposed to see the truth. That it is decaying before our eyes. So I implore you and I beg you, make sure your children learn these signs. Pass them on to your children. Make sure that the Prophet ﷺ, they are a reflection of it. Every time somebody meets a Muslim in this country, he should have a permanent impression. But I've never met people like this before. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make us among those who listen to Allah's words and heed them and follow them. Jazakumullah khair for listening. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.